It was April 2018. Brazil watched in shock as former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was imprisoned. For many, it was the end of an era. For others, the beginning of one of the greatest international solidarity campaigns of the 21st century. The official narrative tried to frame it as just the conclusion of a corruption trial. But outside the gates of the federal police in Curitiba, and beyond Brazil's borders, another story was being written. A story of resistance, organization, and hope. Today, we're going behind the scenes of the Lula Livre movement abroad. Not just as spectators, but to understand the machinery that kept this cause alive across 5 continents. How did the Brazilian diaspora organize? Who were the global leaders who took up the cause? And how did this outside pressure help change the course of Brazil's political history? Everything began in Curitiba. The Lula Livre Vigil, a camp set up just meters from the former president's cell, became the beating heart of the movement. For 580 days, through sun, rain, and cold, activists took turns to ensure Lula was never alone. A good morning, good afternoon, and good night echoed daily. But this vigil was not confined to southern Brazil. It inspired the world. In March 2018, during the World Social Forum in Salvador, the International Committee of Solidarity in Defense of Lula and Democracy in Brazil was born. It was the seed of what would become an unstoppable global network. Far from home, Brazilian expatriates felt the blow, and they decided to act. The driving force of the movement abroad did not come only from large institutions, but from grassroots activism. Ordinary people who turned longing and outrage into political action. The international branches of the Workers' Party, the PT, which had existed since the 90s, took on a central role. In cities like Lisbon, London, Boston, and Miami, these groups served as bridges between the Brazilian community and local society. In Europe, the International Front of Brazilians Against the Coup, FIBRA, based in Germany, became the great conductor of mobilizations. In France, for example, the Libres Lula Committee was born. Joining forces with the French Communist Party, they brought the debate about Brazil to the heart of Paris, at massive events like the traditional Fête de El Humanite. In Geneva, Switzerland, solidarity gained institutional weight. During the International Labor Conference, more than 150 trade unionists from dozens of countries crossed their arms and raised signs calling for Lula's freedom. The global labor movement quickly understood. The imprisonment of a former workers' leader was an attack on all workers. The battle, however, was hard. The international press initially focused on the accusations of Operation Car Washington. The movement needed to dispute the narrative. It needed to show that what was happening in Brazil was a political trial, conducted by a biased judge, Sergio Moro, with the clear goal of removing Lula from the 2018 elections. To break through this blockade, grassroots diplomacy went into action. Major global figures lent their voices. American linguist Noam Chomsky visited Lula in prison and declared him the most important political prisoner in the world. Former Uruguayan President Pepe Mujica and Hollywood actor Danny Glover also made their presence felt. And from Argentina came one of the most symbolic gestures of support. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Adolfo Pérez Esquivel, who led an international campaign for Lula himself to receive the Nobel. The peak of global organization came in April 2019, on the first anniversary of the imprisonment. The international Lula Livre journey proved the strength of the network. Simultaneous acts erupted in 36 cities across 16 countries. From New York to Sydney, from Madrid to Buenos Aires. In Geneva, demonstrators protested in front of UN headquarters. The message was clear: the world is watching Brazil. And the UN indeed was watching. The persistence in the streets found echo in the courts and in diplomacy. The revelations of the Vaza Jato, showing the collusion between the judge and the prosecutors, confirmed what activists had been shouting for years. In 2021, Brazil's Supreme Court annulled the convictions, recognizing Sergio Moro's bias. And the following year, the UN Human Rights Committee issued a historic ruling. Lula's trial violated procedural guarantees and his political rights. The movement had won the battle of truth. The consequences of this struggle spilled over into the ballot box. With his rights restored, Lula returned to the race in 2022. And the Brazilian diaspora, strengthened and organized by years of resistance, gave its answer. Abroad, Lula won with more than 51% of valid votes, defeating the far-right in decisive electoral colleges across Europe. The Lula Leaver movement abroad was not just a cry for help. It was a lesson in political organization, resilience, and international solidarity. It proved that the fight for justice and democracy knows no borders, and that, even in the darkest hours, the voice of an organized people can echo around the world until the truth prevails.